Hello and welcome to the Jet Life Podcast. My name is Tom Lelio. I'm your ultimate jet guide, and today I am joined by Ken Baylor, who I met at the NBAA Las Vegas convention. He's a top 40 under 40 recipient, and I can't wait to talk with you, Ken, more about operations and creative uses for aviation and some advice for that next generation of aviation professionals. So thank you so much for being here, Ken.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Tom. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. Sorry for the interruption. I just had the opportunity to speak with Jason Zilberbrand over at VREF, and they are launching their brand new VREF 3.0. VREF is the trusted resource that many lenders will use to provide a valuation on an aircraft. With 3.0, they're introducing a more mobile-friendly interface. You're going to be able to connect with brokers and owners. You're going to be able to get instant valuations. You're going to be able to find out information about aircraft that are currently for sale and historical data as well. Whether you're a broker or a buyer, having access to reliable information when it comes to market trends and it comes to aircraft valuations is extremely important. So if you want to check it out and even get 10% off, you can go to go.theultimatejetguide.com/VREF for more information. Thank you so much, VREF, for sponsoring this video. And if you're joining us for the first time, we pull back the curtain on private aviation to help you buy or sell your private jet without wasting time or losing money. And today we have the launch of the Ultimate Jet Guide. The ebook version and the physical copies will be available next week. So if you haven't checked it out and you're looking to buy a private jet or you're looking to get into aviation, I recommend checking out my book. Go to theultimatejetguide.com. There's the shameless plug for the
awesome.
day.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm so excited about it for sure. So Ken, as I alluded to earlier, you're an NBAA top 40 under 40. You're also an operations manager, whatever that all means, for Next Era Energy, and hopefully we'll get into that in just a moment. But you're also an NBAA certified aviation manager. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into aviation, and how you ended up where you're at today.
So I started in high school. I've wanted to be in aviation since I was 5 years old. My grandpa was a fighter pilot in World War II. I always heard the stories about it. Aviation to my brother and I was just second nature. So we always wanted to do something in that space. I think we all start off wanting to be astronauts and then realize that we don't have the 50-pound brains like everybody else does. So we came back down into earth here and it really kicked off my career as an intern late high school. To where I was working for an outfit down in Fort Lauderdale International. Started off sweeping the floors all the way up to managing the cabin before aircraft departures. And that really set the bar for me. That set the standard to which I compare everything else that I do in this world going forward. So ended up going to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I was an air traffic control major.
Sure.
I ended up having an eyesight issue that I wasn't aware of until a couple years into it. And ended up getting, of all things, a communications degree, which has actually served me quite well out of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And then fast forward to my first job in aviation, where I was hired into a 15-month cross-training program with Cessna up in Greenwich, Connecticut, and went through kind of the whole gamut of 91K and 135 operations, working through sales and pilot recruiting, dispatch, owner services, and scheduling. So that gave me a good taste, and I ended up in dispatch after that. I really enjoy the operations aspect of things, the problem solving. It's every day is a new challenge for me. And fast forward to today, I've worked for several different flight departments and several different large corporations, and now I'm down here in West Palm Beach, Florida, working for Next Era Energy as the operations manager here, managing 5 aircraft, 4 jets and 1 helicopter for the power company down here.
Gotcha. Well, let's dive right into the operations. I know it's kind of a buzzword. You and I were joking earlier about it's just kind of like an amalgamation of all different kinds of duties. Let's rapid fire. So if someone's looking to buy a private jet, whether it's their first jet or their 5th jet, this idea of operations, what all goes into owning an aircraft?
Well, a lot of part of my side of the business is doing the 10 hours of work for every hour flown kind of deal. That's how I always put it. When you're purchasing an aircraft or looking to purchase an aircraft, the due diligence portion of everything is extremely important. And part of that is, and I think we'll speak to this a little bit later, but is a lot of about mission capability, what you're looking to do with your aircraft, how you're looking to do it, and who you're looking to do it with. So I think that's a big portion of it. Who you're going to be serving with that aircraft. Is it yourself? Is it your corporation, your community, the state? There's a lot of different factors that go into that. And a big part of my job is maintaining and kind of forward-looking in the future for what we're doing here now and what we're going to be doing down the road. So that's a big portion of it.
So you're just handling the flights. You just all you need is an iCalendar, and the boss calls you and say we want to fly on Thanksgiving. So you just put that in the calendar, and then your job is done as operations manager. Or is there more to it? I mean, do you have to schedule some pilots? Maybe do you have to make sure the insurance is taken care of? Do you have to make sure there's fuel availability? I mean, what else do you have to do when you're the man that's responsible for the operations of an aircraft? What else is involved in those duties?
I would have a lot more hair on my head if that was all that was required as far as the iCalendar and just sending the aircraft. I do not have that much hair anymore. And a big part of that is because, as you allude to, there is a lot going on in the background. So just to kind of give you the life cycle of a trip request and mission that goes on for us, if we're doing an international trip, let's say. So we get the request. We have to evaluate everything in the background: feasibility, runways, aircraft capability, fuel.
Stop right there, man. I mean, I want to go from Florida to Barcelona. I'm just like, okay, make it happen. Meanwhile, you're like, oh shoot, like what runways, what aircraft we can use, fuel weights, passenger weight. I mean, I just made one request and you're already like, hold the phone, keep going. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in today's political climate, what are we flying over? If we're going internationally into some weird spots, a lot of our job is kind of sourcing intelligence for flight operational areas, airspace, permits, the whole gamut. Also working with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, making sure that we check all the boxes with our aircraft compliance, our pilot compliance. There is so much that goes into this, and that's why when you're looking to purchase an aircraft, mission set, what you're looking to do down the road, it's really important to evaluate those things because those will actually work into, obviously, your fixed and variable costs down the road as well. So there's a lot more going on here in the background. I don't say any of this to scare anybody as far as not owning an aircraft, but I've always fancied myself a realist, and I always want to know what I'm going into, just like your buyers want to know what they're getting into before I pull the trigger on owning an aircraft. So that's a big portion of it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, one of my core values here is education, and the reason for that is when I'm going to buy something, I want to learn about it. Tell me about it, and as long as I know what I'm getting myself into, I can make a decision. I can't make a decision if I don't have all the information. So bring on the information. So I mean, so operations. So someone calls you and says, "Make this trip happen." To make that trip happen, and we haven't even left. We haven't picked an aircraft yet. We're trying to figure out where we're flying to, getting all the permits and all that kind of stuff. What about on a non-trip basis? Just the aircraft sitting there and not doing anything. I mean, if it's not flying, that means that you must have nothing to do then as an operations person. Am I right?
Again, I go back to the hair reference. There's all kinds of stuff that goes in the background, and a big portion of that is maintenance. Every time an aircraft flies, it's got to come home and get maintained. And that speaks to its pedigree. It speaks to its operational reliability for you. We call it a dispatch reliability. You want that above 90-95% each time. Basically, do the motors turn on whenever I hit the button? And so we're also taking care of things like insurance. We're taking care of fuel negotiations for pricing to make sure that we're getting you the best deal on fuel. And I mean, geez, there's just such a myriad of things out there that we're looking at that it's really important to have somebody that is in the know working for you, whether it's based on a consultant basis or someone that's full-time like myself, knowing what we're doing in the background to make sure that when you arrive at the aircraft, all of that's taken care of and you don't have to worry about it.
I think it's important to distinguish between a few different terms that were kind of thrown out in this setting. We talk about owner, an operator, operations, and then management. I think for the majority of the people watching, they're looking to buy a private jet, probably their first private jet. They don't have a fleet of 4 or 5 aircraft that they need to an operations manager, but perhaps just this idea of you're going to own a private jet. Now, who's going to manage it? We'll make it even simpler. I think that's kind of for you. When are some of the? I mean, if they've got a pilot or a mechanic that says they'll manage it for them, what are some tips that you would have for a brand new owner? Should they hire a third party to manage their aircraft?
I think it depends on what type of aircraft they're purchasing. If they're purchasing a smaller aircraft that's going to get them and their family around a little bit, I think it's great to have a great relationship with local mechanics and local vendors that are able to service you. But if you're looking at flying into aircraft that are going transcontinental or intercontinental, or even just on a regular basis serving a corporation, that's when you really want to focus in and zero in on somebody that's got the expertise. And I think leaning on professionals like you and I, you went back to education. And I think that's so important for people to understand that they want somebody that's going to have their best interest in mind as well as their assets' best interest. And that can run the gamut from maintenance to finance to flying. I mean, it's all kinds of things. So it's really case by case basis. For an operation like mine, though, with 5 aircraft, we have 25 people supporting these aircraft full time. So, and we're pretty much we're a large flight department, but it can go bigger or smaller at any time. So that's where I'd be.
Yeah, I really think it comes down to this idea of peace of mind. What's that peace of mind worth for you? I mean, you can get a management company for a small, citation for a couple grand a month,
Absolutely.
And it's just that peace of mind knowing that someone's looking at the maintenance reports, someone's looking out for your best interest. Especially if you're going to have contract pilots, you don't want to salary somebody, salary the management company so they find you the best pilots, for your aircraft. Shopping insurance, shopping hangars, just keeping an eye on your asset. If you're buying a private jet, you probably have someone handling your finances. You have a finance manager. You may even have a family office with someone handling, kind of your personal life. I think if you want that peace of mind, I think you really, truly do need to consider a management person in this purchase. Don't just buy a jet and be like, I'll figure it out myself, or I can't afford a management company. If you can't afford a couple grand a month to watch over this asset, maybe we're not quite in a position to be buying the asset.
And I've seen some people step into that in the past, thankfully not on a drastic basis, but they get into it. You're absolutely right. If you can't afford a couple extra grand a month to have it done right, I'm a big proponent of everything being done right. And if you don't think you can swing that or it's going to be tight, you might need to reevaluate your purchase of the aircraft right now. But it's a super important thing to have capable people. And to your point, management companies are pretty turnkey. They have all the resources there that are working for you in the background, and they're dealing with other people's resources. They've seen and done a lot of it or all of it. And, excellent asset to have on hand.
For sure. Let's shift a little bit to, you've been in aviation for a long time. One of the things that I always like to point out to especially buyers or even owners, creative uses for aviation. Right. Obviously it'll get you from point A to point B. It's a time machine, to be the buzzword, and they probably have an idea of why they want it. They're sick of commercial, et cetera. Let's talk about 3 different categories of creative uses of aviation, and maybe you can give us an example of what you've seen. Let's start off with just the business or the creative travel. You mentioned family, you mentioned 4-legged family. What are some examples of people just using their asset for transportation?
I've seen everything from people transporting only their pets on board. In fact, there's an aircraft here at West Palm Beach that its sole purpose is to exist to transport polo horses, Air Horse One, which is pretty neat. Not ours, thankfully, but horses. So they have stables configured inside of a 727, and that's really neat to see come in during polo season. So there's a creative use, which it always cracks me up when I see it, but it's pretty impressive. So, people are spending a lot of money on their horses, obviously.
I was going to be blown away by the Bijan Frise getting a Citation 10, lift to New York, but horses, wow, I wasn't expecting that.
I also remember a story back in my days at Cessna when I had a passenger manifest come across my table, my desk at a dispatch, and it had 7 cats on board and no humans other than the pilots. And I went back to owner service and I said, "What's the passenger's name?" And they said, "There is no passenger on board; it's just cats." And so we've seen that. So there's the comical, but which is pretty funny. But on the more serious note, I think one of the more creative and most beneficial things I've seen to especially family jets, when a family member gets sick, when a family member is non-ambulatory or requires some extra care, these aircraft and the capabilities they have on board really lend themselves to the comfort factor or the care factor for medical flights. Also, I'm sure you're pretty familiar, and I'm sure your listeners are as well. You've got Angel Flight out there as well that are flying cancer patients back and forth. So companies donate their aircraft or seats to that cause.
That's
Those are
right.
really
As an
important
owner, you
things.
can donate. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
donate for. Yeah, that's a great point. Like, what's interesting about the family component, and like you said, not ambulatory. Maybe it's just they have a fear of flights. They have a fear
Absolutely.
of going out in public or people, or they just aren't comfortable with commercial travel with all that comes with it. This is one less thing for a family member or a business partner or whoever to worry about. Like, hey, just hop on the plane. Will make you as comfortable as possible, and you'll get to your destination. I talk about, in this idea of jet life, it's not just this idea of getting from point A to point B, but it's how do you arrive? What's the quality of your travel? Because if you arrive at your business meeting or worse, your family vacation, and you're cranky AF, like nobody wants to hang out with cranky Tom, cranky
Yeah.
vacation Tom. My kids hate me. My wife don't like me. Like I'm a pain in the butt to the waiters and stuff like that. Like
Right.
that it doesn't matter that I got there, right? It
Yeah.
matters that I got there in the right frame of mind. And if you have a private jet, you can help make that a reality for people.
I also think that you hit on something very important, and I know it's important for my executives and passengers I've flown in the past, and it's the fact that sometimes the only solitude these folks get on board is on board these aircraft. They're very busy CEOs, they're very busy executives. They have family engagements they need to get back to after an important meeting out west. This is stuff that is important to them in their quality of life. We always tell people we're not here to make them any money in aviation, right? We're providing a service. And it's very important for us to provide that high level of service to them so that they can perform at their top levels as well. And I think that's very important to a buyer or a person that owns an aircraft. I think you hit the nail on the head. It really, how are you arriving? I think is the best way of putting it. You said it best.
Yeah, no, I
And
appreciate that.
these help with that. Yeah.
Let's talk about maybe have you seen any philanthropic uses of the aircraft, kind of maybe dovetailing into some humanitarian aid type stuff? What are other creative uses that you've seen at your time with aviation?
I think one of the coolest things I ever witnessed is whenever there's a worldwide or a world event, a natural disaster, anything, I always see the private aviation industry stepping or leaning in very heavily, very rapidly. And it's people that I've said in past interviews that one of the greatest things about this industry is that it's full of good people. It's full of people that want to help. And I see that especially when bad things happen around either your state or your country or other countries. I mean, look at what's going on in Israel right now. I saw people immediately wanting to send aid over there via private jets, whether it's food, water, people, whatever it is. Those are the types of things that I think are so important to give back. When you've gotten to that level, if you can give back, I think it's really important to do that. And you can't find a more efficient business tool to do that than to load your aircraft down with food, water, aid, clothes, whatever it is, and send it. And I just think that's a really neat way to do things. I know that on my company's end, being the power company, we have a lot of mutual aid agreements, or there's a bit of a brotherhood there. If in someone else's service territory, it's kind of like when I was a firefighter. If someone over the next town over needs help putting a fire out, we'll come help you, and we do the same here. So we send teams of line workers out to places. We've received teams of line workers back from other folks as well to help us, and that's just it's really neat to see that. It's one of my favorite things.
I really appreciate that you called it like a tool. And the reason I like that is because I think of, when the shit hits the fan, you want as many tools at your disposal as possible.
Yes.
And the fact that you have this tool, maybe you're not thinking about it now, like you're not a church, right? You're not buying the jet to go and provide, humanitarian aid. But when it hits the fan and you have this tool at your disposal, all of a sudden you can be creative. It's true freedom, right? It's the ability to use it in a capacity.
And there's unlimited ways to do that. I think, I used to work for some news crews back in the day that would get around, and their whole thing was getting the word out to make sure the general public knows how bad it is or what people need. There's other things I've seen supplies flown. I mean, there's so many different ways you can kind of skin that cat from using your aircraft, getting people out there, and not only that, but we can get these airplanes in and out to where commercial airlines can't go. So you just have the reachability and the ability to touch places that aren't able to get touched normally by aviation for help.
I appreciate that. I want to ask you a question that we didn't talk about. We don't have to keep this in the interview if you don't want to, but I was wondering, just because it was an idea that came across my mind when you were mentioning, what has your experience been with this concept of sustainability, specifically in reference to the critics of aviation that are just like, private jets are the worst thing ever for the environment, and they're all terrible people if you own a private jet, and I'm going to handcuff myself to your landing gear so you can't leave, or take a bunch of paint and spray your jet because I don't agree with what you're doing, a la what we've seen, unfortunately, in Europe. That sort of a thing. Well, first of all, I mean, can you speak to that, and then, what would you say into that? How would you speak into that conversation?
Yeah, I can't get into carbon numbers and things like that because I just simply don't know. What I do know is that the people I've worked with, what I do know is that the people I've worked with in the past and currently, we're always looking for better ways to do things in a more sustainable nature, especially when it comes to load factor of our jets. We don't want empty jets flying around, and we want to make sure we're loading them with as many people as possible. And I think to that end, the industry as a whole is working very hard. We just got back from NBAA base, right? And the entire theme of that is sustainability. They want to climb fast up into sustainability. We're talking about sustainable aviation fuel. We're talking about more efficient motors, electric VTOL aircraft now that are going to be doing a lot of great work in the future, I think. I don't think there's a perfect solution to all of this right now. It's certainly not within the realm of possibility that we're all going to be flying electric 737s around in the next year or so. But having been in this industry for the better part of 30 years, I know that they're passionate about it, like I'm passionate about aviation, so I respect their views as far as that goes. But I think that this industry has not stagnated on that goal of decarbonization and sustainability, and I mean, more than anything, I saw the biggest push I've seen to date at NBAA base a couple weeks ago. And I think that we're working hard as an industry to strive toward that. So I hope that one day we can all live in peace.
And I think that's important. I think it's important because we don't give an opportunity for people that are in the field or in aviation to just share, hey, we feel a responsibility on this issue. We feel accountability on this issue. There's not there's this idea that private aviation professionals and owners are just they thumb their nose to the environment, and I don't think that's really the case. I mean, I think the majority of people involved want something better. Like you said, we're always striving for something better. And they take responsibility for what they're doing. And like you said, they will try to, carbon offset. Maybe they're donating to other organizations and projects that are offsetting the carbon emissions that they have. We're looking for better technologies, better ways of doing things. Like you said, your loads, making sure that jets aren't just flying, on their own. So The reason I wanted to bring up, not so much that, I was looking for you for like as the carbon emissions expert per se, but just your years and experience in aviation. What have you seen? I haven't been in aviation as long as you have. I've been here for like 4 years, right? I was just kind of hanging out with teenagers, eating pizza at a church for the majority of my career. So what I have seen, I just kind of wanted to see if you are finding the same thing, is that aviation's full of great people that would love to see the most impactful and sustainable way of doing things as possible.
Yeah, and I think just in my 23 years, I guess at this point, in the industry, I mean, I've seen things go leaps and bounds. I mean, I was starting off with G2Bs with hush kits on them that are rolling dinosaurs out of the back as soon as they hit the throttles all day long, to flying these aircraft now that you're looking at engines that are, I think it was cited a couple weeks ago. Maybe it was about 30% more efficient, and even more. Don't quote me on that, probably, but I mean, gosh, I just look at what our burns are right now on the aircraft, and they're so much less than what they used to be. And I think that the technology, also, I think what's really cool is that air traffic control has got involved. I mean, we're talking about they're doing optimal air traffic control routings. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on in the background for sustainability, to make sure that we're not flying aircraft around unnecessarily long times. We're getting them more point to point than ever before. To answer your question, has there been a leap? Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to quantify it from my end, other than what I've seen.
Yeah. Well, it's, and I wrote this in the book, like, it's a note of encouragement. That's what I want, is for the buyers, for the owners. Like, I want to encourage, like, yeah, you might hear some negative press in the news,
of course,
but number one, we're always trying to do better. And number two, don't forget, like, your investment in a private jet is an investment in an entire ecosystem.
Oh, absolutely.
That sets up, I mean, maybe you want to speak to that real quick. Just the ecosystem. When someone invests in a jet, I mean, they're handling pilots, manufacturers, managers. I mean, it's huge.
I think a very plausible argument could be made that when you purchase a jet, you're obviously creating jobs. You're creating jobs not just in the umbrella of your scope with the pilots and the mechanic, right? You're employing the local guy that's pumping gas into your aircraft. You're employing airport employees. You're employing city employees that are maintaining the airport. I mean, it's business aviation. It's that old saying of no plane, no gain, right? So you're actively pumping money into the local economy. You're pumping it into sustainable aviation technology. You're investing in companies that are invested in those things, and their whole thing is to make sure that you're flying around the most efficient, awesome jet in the world, right? And they're not sitting back on their paws with the same old stuff. So I think that the blast radius, I mean that in a good way, of purchasing a jet is incredible. I mean, it's an impactful purchase.
Yep. Yeah, and I appreciate you speaking to that, because I think it's something that, you're buying a jet, you're excited what it's going to do for your business, and then, like, you should feel a pat on the back, like, hey, listen, you are investing in this economy. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So last thing for our buyers, then we'll shift a little bit, talk a little bit for brokers, but where have you seen owners get taken advantage of or make a mistake that could have been avoided, whether that was in the purchase of the aircraft or in the ownership of the aircraft?
One of the biggest things that I see in my seat as a dispatcher and an operations manager is mission capability. You want to make sure that when you go into the purchase like this, it's like any other big purchase, but this is a large purchase, right? So you want to make sure that what you're purchasing is going to serve you now and into the future. You're talking range. You're talking, where can it land? Is the runway long enough, short enough? Can the aircraft perform in and out of there? You don't want to get duped by an OEM salesman or anything like that. And I'm not saying that they dupe people, but you want to make sure that you're doing your own due diligence in the background and seek out the informed, educated broker or someone that can represent you during the purchase of the aircraft. Somebody much like yourself that has taken the time.
You need like a guide, like an ultimate jet guide.
Totally. Yeah, that's right. I like that. Perhaps a book, maybe. But you want to make sure that you're surrounding yourself by, if you're not an aviation person, and even if you are an aviation person, you want to get that second and third opinion, right? You want to make sure that whatever you're purchasing is going to serve you well, and that's the best way to summarize that. But I have seen folks Sometimes when they tell you they can fly coast to coast, doesn't mean they can do it with a full load, right? We know as well as anybody else, winds, fuel load, passenger weights, all that stuff takes into consideration routing. You could actually get into a bad situation in terms of, you might need a fuel stop you didn't expect, and then you'll be upset. You don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah, if you Google map how far you need to go, like don't forget that's usually a straight line. And as much as we try, we don't usually fly in straight lines. And not to mention when you get there, you can't be on E, as far as your fuel tanks go. Like you can't, you need to have reserves in there that you're not taking into account. And so that's the one thing with ranges, I always will tell somebody like, listen, if you want to go 1,000 nautical miles and you're looking at this jet and it goes 1,000 nautical miles, like you're probably going to stop. Like just let's be clear here. Like just kind of cut the range in half. And if you need to do that, you'll be fine. But if you're trying to max this thing out, just know what you're getting into is kind of how I'll always say it.
Absolutely. I think that's incredibly important. And finding someone that's able to guide you in that right direction, besides a salesperson from the manufacturer or whatever, is just a great idea in general.
Have you had any owners you've either been taken advantage of or made a mistake when it comes to maintenance or management or pilots or insurance or financing or any of the other peripheral things that maybe you could share a little bit about?
As far as horror stories, thankfully, no. I've never seen anybody get absolutely hosed before. I have seen, back when I worked in fractional aviation, back to what we were just talking about, mission capability. Perhaps they purchased into a smaller aircraft fraction, and then they would have to they find themselves upgrading quite often, which turns into a multiplier of the hours, right? So you purchase 10 hours of the aircraft, whatever, arbitrarily speaking, and that's 10 hours of that aircraft, right? But if you need to go to a bigger airplane, then you're talking about maybe it's going to only be about 5.8 hours of that bigger aircraft because the multiplier on that hourly rate's much higher. So no, I haven't seen anybody get screwed. I thankfully I haven't seen that. Now, does it happen? Absolutely, all day long. I've been lucky enough to not be exposed to that, and it's a shame whenever I do hear stories about it. But personally, no, I haven't had a big one.
I think it really comes down to know who you're doing business with, like asking those questions.
Yeah.
How long you've been in business for, who are your contacts, do you have a website, do you have a LinkedIn page, like can I get to know you, or did I just find you on a Facebook group and you said you have a jet that you want to sell me? So knowing who you're doing business with, I think is important. And I think for the most part, it would seem to me, I've seen both sides of aviation. I've seen the white hat and I've seen the black hat, if you will, of aviation. And you can pretty much pick out those guys that are trying to do something pretty quickly if you're attuned to it. If you just kind of go in blindly trusting anybody, then you can get taken advantage of. But if you have a decent radar of like a good human being, there's certain things that will, like for example, I had somebody, call me up, he's like, hey, I saw you on YouTube. I'm thinking about buying a jet. Let me send you this link to a jet that I'm thinking about buying. And it was a link for one of the highest brokerages, in the world. I think you probably know Jetcraft. What this email sender had done was made an exact replica copy of the Jetcraft website and just replaced it with just like Jetcraft instead of .com, it was like .co or jetcraft.com, but it had a dash in it, like just slightly, so that it kind of looked legit. But like if you really looked at it, you're like, oh my gosh. And the big red flag was they were asking this guy, for money and wiring instructions.
Huge red flag.
Yeah, exactly. $10 million jet for $2 million if you just send $100,000 down payment and secure it. Now here give us your information. But there are like the scammers out there. But just a little bit of due diligence, you can probably save yourself some headaches.
I agree. I have a personal rule with my stuff, just with vendors, is that can you sell me something? Sure, but I don't want to be cold called. I don't want to be emailed. I'm going to do my due diligence for 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe 3 days. It doesn't matter. But I'm savvy enough in this industry to kind of do my own research and then make those calls myself. You can get, like you said, you can get a pretty good idea who to call pretty quickly. And thankfully that person was savvy enough to reach out to you. So
Yeah.
that was a big deal. But uh, you know, I think also that the clientele that we're dealing with at this level are, they wouldn't be where they are today without being fairly savvy in a lot of things. But what they don't
Mm,
know, right? I don't know how, if a garbage
right.
company came up to me and asked me to buy an airplane, I don't know how to get rid of garbage, other than to throw it in my driveway can. But you know, I know how to get you a jet.
Yep, exactly. All right, well, let's kind of start wrapping up towards the broker side. So I know you haven't been a jet broker in terms of selling the actual asset itself.
Hmm.
You did a little bit of charter sales, and obviously you're in management. But just for someone interested in getting into aviation, I think this is one of the great things about MBAA. They really do seem to be propping up the young professionals, the Yo pros, the next generation. And I was actually just talking to someone, a CEO of one of the big brokerages, and we were having this conversation of, we really value making training as available as possible to the next
Hmm.
generation because it's a play for the future. And they were getting some pushback from the other higher ups, like, no, we should keep it closed. And we were talking about why we think we should, make it as available as possible. And the main reason came down to, if you want aviation to change and you want it to grow and improve, like, why wouldn't you take responsibility to start training and improving the next generation? Because it's easier to
Yeah.
change that than it is to try to move like this big, cruise liner ship that is, business aviation. So, what would your advice be for people who want to get into private aviation?
Hmm. My biggest thing, and I think a big indicator of good leadership with anybody, is to start developing people as soon as you can get a hold of them. If they, and to those people, I say reach out to those of us in the industry already and just ask. We've said it before, and I'll say it a million more times. There's so many good people in this industry, and I have been a benefactor of those people in the past. I wouldn't be here today without the people that took me under their wing from a
Mm,
mentorship standpoint. And it was simply because I asked them to help me, or they offered to help me in some cases. So I think getting that just to hear someone like you tell me that people are trying to close things off to people is really um, counterproductive to what we're doing here, right? Like we should be bringing up the young people in this industry and teaching them the right way to do business. And not only that, but I think there's a ton of value in the younger generation right now with new ideas,
mm,
especially when it comes to technology. And you talk about sustainability, I think those folks are going to lead the way via technology and via great ideas, um, far after we're gone out of this industry. But the bottom line is we should be developing these old and new, young and old, from the get go. And I think that it's really important for them to understand that we are a place that values learning and personal development.
mm.
I think we can both agree on that. There are going to be some places that don't value that, and those are the places you don't want to work, right? So you always want to be working for somebody or yourself, who cares about personal development and always learning. So the day I stop learning in this industry is the day I need to leave.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that for sure. And I think the biggest call to action for people looking to get into private aviation is, like you said, talk to someone.
Hmm.
I think so many times it's like, well, what can I do? Like, how can I change my resume, or how can I learn a skill or something? It's just like, just talk to people. The answer to
Yeah,
all your questions is talk to somebody, and they
absolutely.
will like walk you through the pathway. And if you haven't found the right person to talk to more people. And
Yeah.
you have to take responsibility that, I love Grant Cardone's quote, success is my duty, it's my obligation, it's my responsibility.
Hmm.
Like, if you want to succeed, you need to take responsibility. Go talk to someone. Don't expect someone to just, here's a job in aviation. Like,
Right.
that doesn't happen. We offer the jobs in aviation to people that we already know, who have already approached us. I'm like, oh, that might be a good opportunity for so and so, right? So I think I really appreciate, just the echoing of talk to somebody, pick up the phone, send an email. And if you don't get an answer, keep
Absolutely.
talking, keep calling, keep following up. Show them you actually want it and that you've got a passion for it, so that they get
Yeah.
that you get their attention.
I think another really important thing is experimentation in terms of jobs. There's so many different things to do in
Mm,
aviation. I know that when I started off in aviation, I wanted to be a pilot, which I am, and I wanted to be an astronaut, which I'm not. But in between there, um, I didn't realize how much I enjoyed pumping gas into airplanes, being outside. I would have never known about dispatching had I not kind of tasted the different things that are out there. There are so many different opportunities out there. And in fact, I was just talking to a kid in my neighborhood, kid's parents in my neighborhood the other day. I'm always listening for people that are interested in aviation as well, because it can be a daunting thing to kind of come up and be like, oh, I want to work in an airport, right? Well,
Yep.
It's incumbent upon us to hear that as well, and kind of nurture that. But experimentation is kind of the biggest thing. Figure out where you want to plug yourself into. It's a big wide world.
Yeah. And I appreciate your kind of call to leaders, develop, when you find talent, develop it young, develop it early. Be on the lookout, leaders, for those that might be interested. Don't have your head down. For a while where I used to work, it was put your head down, do your own deals. Don't worry about any other brokers. Don't go to NBAA. It's a waste of time. Just be very insular. And, to the credit is, it helped me sell a lot, but I think I also missed out on a lot of opportunities by being so insular. So, I've been looking forward this past year and moving forward, continuing to broaden, my horizons when it comes to aviation.
And I love to see people like you doing that, because, I think anybody who's not developing their people, it's, frankly, a toxic work environment at that point. You need to get out there and take the bull by its horns, and, look what you've created here. I mean, you've been in the industry for 4 years, you said?
Yep.
I mean, that's incredible, man. You already wrote a book. You're here having a podcast. I mean, look at you. Seriously. I mean, I love seeing this stuff. I love seeing people win. And I think we as leaders need to love seeing people win as well. These people, you should always hope that the person you hire is coming for your job. And that's just really important stuff. I think that's a personal belief on my end. You always want to be training your replacement in a good way. And being able to develop people like that and mentor them, there's just nothing more important to me.
I love it. Ken, dropping so many just like bombs here, like with the leaders and everything. I love it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
I love what you're doing here. Yeah, this is awesome.
Thank you. Where can people connect with you if they want to reach out?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I think my username is KM Baylor, Kilo Mike Baylor, Baylor. And that's probably the best way to reach me on the professional side. And then that's how you and I got connected. So I think it's a very powerful tool. Networking in aviation is enormous, and LinkedIn is a huge portion of it. I also think getting hooked into the NBAA YoPro side of things is really important, because you're going to get into it with people that have a passion for the industry. The entire NBAA organization does, but you get hooked in with people really quick that way. So networking is a huge thing as well.
Agreed. Well, thank you so much, Ken. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Tom. You have a good one. And congrats on the book.